everybody, it's Sarah, and before we get into today's video, there's two things I want to talk about. The first is that yes, I am obviously not at home. I'm currently at my mom's place because I thought, you know what, if we can't go on vacation because first of all we're responsible people and second of all the hotels are closed anyway, then at least I'll get a more vacation-y feeling staying at my mom's place and not at home. But also I promised her that I'd help her rearrange, clean and sort all of her bookshelves, which we did, which took like 4 days. It was a lot of work because she has a lot of bookshelves. But yeah, the second thing I wanted to talk about is that I got a camera for Christmas, so hopefully you're right now seeing me in more HD. I don't know yet. I might fuck it up with editing, who knows? But that also means that in the next few videos you're gonna get me trying to figure out how to use this camera to the best of my abilities. Right now I feel like I kind of look a little bit washed out, but I don't know if it's like the camera, if it's the lighting. There's a lot of questions right now. Please bear with me. Also bear with me if I keep on looking to the monitor and not into the lens. But since I never managed to do that with my phone anyway, there's not gonna be that much difference, to be honest. But yeah, now that we have all of that out of the way, let's get into the first video of 2021. And as is custom, this first video is all about the last books that I read in the year before. So in the year of 2020, I'm going to talk about the last 6, I believe, books that I read in 2020, and I just realized I forgot to write down my stats for December, so let me quickly go and do that. So my stats for the last month of 2020 as well as the last month that I will do stats in a wrap up because I kind of don't feel like doing it anymore in 2021. But the stats for December 2020 were I read a total of 14 books, 11 of which were new to me and 3 of which were rereads. Although I don't know if one of them counts as a reread because, you know, I reread it but I read a different version of said book that I had read before. But yeah, so that's that on that. In terms of genres, I read 3 classics, I read 3 urban fantasy, and the rest of the books were all high fantasy, so pretty monotonous in December, and that came out to about 6,400 pages read in the month of December. And lastly, in terms of star ratings, I had 1 5-star, I had 5 4 stars, I had 2 3 stars, and I had 2 2.5 stars, and that came out to about an average of 3.3 stars per books, although I have only counted the books that weren't rereads in my average and like in my star ratings. And I have to say that I had 1 book that I did not give a rating at all because it just was the type of book that I didn't rate. Also, this will be the last wrap-up in which I will talk about ratings because I thought I'd try to not rate books in 2021. We'll see how that goes. But yeah, now we can get into the books. As always, I have already done a mid-month wrap-up, which I will leave linked down below and up there. I won't talk about the books that I talked about in that wrap-up in this wrap-up again. So if you want to know what I read in the first month of December, first half of December, you will have to go and check that wrap-up out. And let's start, as always, with the rereads, of which I had 1 in the second half of December, and that was Wolfblade by Jennifer Fallon. This is the first book in the Hydron Chronicles, and it's a reread for me. Of course, I decided to do a lot of rereads in 2021 as well, and I just happened to start one of my planned rereads in December. Wolfblade, or the Hydron Chronicles, is the prequel series to Jennifer Fallon's Demon Child trilogy, and in this series we follow some of the side characters from that other series. We more specifically follow Mala Wolfblade, who is the younger sister of the Hydron High Prince. The High Prince of Hydria. That's what I wanted to say. And since it's not very likely that her brother will ever get an heir for different reasons, Marla herself is of course the prime prize of Hydria. And so we follow her as she turns from this very naive, starry-eyed young woman who still believes in true love, and as she turns into someone who is very politically savvy because she needs that, because she does not have any direct power over herself, over her life, over anything. However, she's not okay with that, and so she needs to be politically more powerful so that she can keep her son, her children, her family safe. And yeah, I absolutely loved rereading this. I gave it 5 stars again, but I'm someone who is big on nostalgia, so there's some nostalgia in that 5-star rating. Otherwise I would probably give it a 4 or a 4.5 star rating. There are some problems that I have discovered with it on a reread that I didn't really see that much when I was younger, when I last read it, but I will have a review of the entirety of the series up once I'm done with books 2 and 3, so I won't talk too much about this book right now, but do pick it up because it's amazing. Next, the book I didn't rate was Lady Gregory's Complete Irish Mythology. This is kind of a classics collection of, you know, Irish mythology and legends. And I didn't rate it because I usually do not rate fairy tale collections because, I don't know, it just seems wrong, because sometimes I like the stories but I'm not a fan of how they're told and so on. But yeah, I'm a fan of Irish mythology, and so I did really enjoy this book, although it's not necessarily the mythology collection that I would recommend if you want to get into Irish mythology, because it was quite hard to read in places, because after all it was written quite a long time ago. Then next I have The Dark Tide by Alicia Jasinska. I gave this 2.5 stars, sadly. This is a sapphic YA adult standalone, and I think they're just no longer for me. I mean, okay, first of all, before we get into it, what is this about? This is a kind of enemies to lovers sapphic romance. We follow Lena, I think her name was, I already forgot the main character's name, but we follow our main character who lives in this village where every year the tide has to be calmed so that it doesn't, swamp the entirety of the village. And the way this is done is that the witch queen of the village sacrifices one of the young boys, or teenage boys of the village, and chooses one of them. And our main character, one year to save her brother as well as her crush, offers herself as the sacrifice to the witch queen. And so then follows the enemies to lovers whole thing. You probably it's a pretty typical story, and it sounded really interesting. However, I am not as much of a fan of YA as I used to be anyway, because a lot of times YA just does not have the complexity anymore of characters, of storytelling, of world building that I look for in my fantasy, in my high fantasy especially. And if you don't have the complexity that I want in a YA series, then it's definitely not there in a YA standalone. And that's really it. I do not think The Dark Tide is a bad book. It's more that it's just not a good book, or at least not a good book for me. There was nothing about this book I enjoyed. I did not at all enjoy the romance. I thought it was very rushed, but obviously it has to be rushed because it's a standalone. You don't really get that many interactions between the two love interests. I don't know, it just wasn't all that interesting. I found the main character was really bland. I found the main love interest, the witch queen, was uninteresting as well. And that's really what it is. It wasn't a bad book, it wasn't a badly written book. It was just a book with nothing there whatsoever. And that in fact brings me on to the next disappointing read of December, my next 2.5 star read, and that was The Lost Book of the White by Cassandra Clare and Wesley Chu, which is the second book in the Eldest Curses series, and also that's the series that follows Magnus and Alec. And each book kind of takes place at a different point within the Shadowhunter Chronicles timeline. Like, the first book takes place after City of Glass, and this one takes place after City of Heavenly Fire within the timeline. And so, yeah. What did I think about this book? I was incredibly bored throughout it, which really disappointed me because I quite enjoyed The Red Scrolls of Magic, which was book 1. And this one was just, I don't know, nothing was there. I felt like the writing was really bad. Like, it was bad. It was so bad. It felt like it wasn't edited at all. And I don't know, just... it felt like the writing in City of Bones, which, you know, wasn't the best writing at all, but it was still an enjoyable story. Like, I loved City of Bones when I read it. Granted, I read it like 10 years ago, more than 10 years ago. Oh my god, it's been so long already. Anyway, I read it more than 10 years ago. I read that one in 2009. But yeah, The Lost Book of the White, just... the writing was bad, the story wasn't there. I don't know, I didn't feel the joy I usually feel at seeing old favorite characters reappear again in stories, and it didn't give me any joy whatsoever, which makes me really sad, especially since I thought I would enjoy it, because I did really enjoy Chain of Gold. My camera just stopped and I need to figure out why, but anyway, next book I want to talk about is The Three Musketeers by Alexandre Dumas, which I gave 4 stars. I of course also read The Count of Monte Cristo earlier this year, and I enjoyed it even more than The Three Musketeers, and then I got The Three Musketeers for my birthday, and I wanted to finish it before the year was over, because reasons. Anyway, I read The Three Musketeers, I really enjoyed it, because, I don't know, I just find Alexandre Dumas, for a classics author, really, really approachable. Which I think is because he was an author at a time where reading wasn't just exclusively for the aristocracy and like the educated high classes anymore, but where just even lower classes were able to read more and more. And he was an author for those people. He was an author for the general population, not necessarily for the most educated people. However, something that makes him a little bit less approachable, which is his big books, also has to do with when he was published, and that is because his books, of course, weren't published as novels first, but in serialized form in literary journals, and because of that I have to say that The Three Musketeers, more so than The Count of Monte Cristo, has a very, like, it doesn't really have one coherent story arc, but it is very episodic. But yeah, when you think about the backgrounds and everything, that makes a lot of sense why it is that way. And so I actually would think that Alexandre Dumas is a good project if you want to read him like over the entirety of a year or something like that. Because, you know, you didn't read him in one through when he was first published, if that makes sense. But anyway, why did I enjoy The Three Musketeers so much? Not necessarily because I love the story so much or I love the characters so much, but I just felt like it was a very ironic and sarcastic novel. So, a little bit of a history lesson, and that is that Alexandre Dumas lived in the 19th century. And the 19th century in France was a mess, to put it like in a very simple way. Basically, you had revolutions every few months and you had a new king every few months, and in between there were some republics, you know. That's why France was already at its, I don't know, 4th or 5th republic by the time most other countries in Europe were at their first republic, which, you know, interesting tidbit. But that just makes The Three Musketeers a really interesting novel, because it, like, on the surface, it is a very imperial novel. You follow the Three Musketeers plus D'Artagnan of His Majesty the King. However, the king is like really incapable, and the Three Musketeers seem like the picture of valor and bravery and whatever, but really they're just drunk and stupid, and they like lose their money all the time because they gamble so much. And then they're also kind of, you know, rapists by omission. I don't know how else to call it. So yeah, trigger warning for not a graphic rape scene, but for like a tricking of a woman into having sex with a man by thinking that that man is another person than he actually is. So yeah, there's a lot of things about the Musketeers that aren't exactly all that, you know, shining. And it just makes it really interesting because I think Dumas did that on purpose. Like, I don't think you're supposed to necessarily love them all that much. I don't know. It just makes for a really interesting analysis of the book, and that's why I really loved it more than the storyline or anything, which, you know, was pretty basic, to be honest. And also, Milady is the best character ever, although the sexism surrounding Milady is crazy. But that's also something. I'm just, for some reason, one of those sick people who absolutely loves when classics are sexist, because I find it hilarious. I find it so hilarious. I mean, it depends on the classic, but yeah, just really interesting, love to analyze it, and can highly recommend if you're into very, like, sarcastically reading classics. And then the last book I want to talk about is Bloody Rose by Nicholas Ames, which is the sequel to Kings of the Wild and the second book in the Band series, which is a series that is set in this world where mercenary bands are pretty much like, you know, rock stars, pop stars, and every book is modeled after a different era within not pop music, but popular music. I think the first one was like 80s rock, and then the second one is 90s punk rock. I might be really wrong though, because I am horrible when it comes to music and the history of music. I know nothing about that. But anyway, in Bloody Rose we follow Tam, who just wants to join a band. She just wants to join a band, and so she manages to join the most famous, the most infamous of them all, and that is Fable, which is the band of Bloody Rose, who of course is the daughter of one of the characters from the first book. And yeah, we follow the band on an adventure, which is basically what every book is, since they do work as like completed standalone novels. And so yeah, I really enjoyed this again. I couldn't tell you if I liked it more or less than Kings of the Wild. I think I enjoyed the general story and narrative a bit less than Kings of the Wild, but I like the main characters the same, and I like the side characters better in this one. Also, the best twist on the there's just one bed so we have to share trope ever, because oh my god, I love emotionally repressed lesbians, which by the way, the main character is a lesbian, which also you don't get to see very often within adult high fantasy, especially not written by men, and it's not written in a creepy way or anything, by the way. So yeah, I really love this book, and I can just highly encourage every one of you to go and read the band, to go and read Kings of the Wild and Bloody Rose. And with that said, that was it for my last wrap up of 2020. That was it for my first video of 2021. If you enjoyed it, please maybe think about giving me a thumbs up and also maybe subscribing. Tell me in the comments down below if you have read any of the books that I have just talked about and what your thoughts were on them, or if you're interested in picking any of the books up. All the links to my social media are in the description box down below, so go and check those out. All the links to my book club of Queens, Witches and Valkyries, where we read one adult high fantasy book written by a woman per month, are also in the description box down below, so go and check those out as well. And I hope I'll see you soon. Bye!